Today, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, PARSHAS KORACH, is also Rosh Chodesh. I would like to speak about, on the PARSHAS HaShavua, on PARSHAS KORACH, but something that's connected to Rosh Chodesh. The Pasuk says, after the Machlokes KORACH va'Adasai, the Oynish was that the ground opened up. Read the pasuk inside. Vatiboka hadam asher tachteim, the ground split open. Vatiftach haaretz es pia, and they fell in. Korach va'adasai, and adas korach, and also the money. The Mishnah says in Avos that one of the things that were created, Sheish Yimei Bereshis Bein Hashmoshes, was this hole that Korach fell in. One of the things that the Asara Dvarim that were created Bein Hashmoshes. The Ramban asks, right in the Parsha, why was it necessary to have a unique creation of this hole for that Korach va'Adasai to fall in? For the Ramban, we see in the Teva, there's something called an earthquake. And a lot of times when there's an earthquake, the ground opens up. So what's the chiddush over here that the ground opens up? These earthquakes and the ground opens up. Ad kedei kach that there had to be a creation bein hashmoshes of Sheish Yimei Bereshis. This whole, says the Ramban, that there's a difference. An earthquake, when there's an earthquake, yes, the ground opens up, but the ground stays open. You see sometimes after an earthquake, a lake or a river or a stream starts running through, or there's like water goes into that hole. But this, that after the ground opened up and they fell in and then the ground got covered again, like what the Pasuk says afterwards, Vatachas aleim haaretz, after they fell in, that the ground closed back up, then already is the chiddush. That's the chiddush over here that happened this week's parsha. That after they fell, they went into the ground. Okay, so these earthquakes, and then you have a rescue team to come help people to come out. But here, that the ground covered over, that chiddush already. That's dafka over here that was created. Sheish Yimei Bereshis Bein Hashmoshes.
That was created, or the whole time?
What'd you say?
Which part was created? Just Medrash.
I would say you're asking what part exactly was created. I think what I would say is the whole thing. The Lashon HaMishnah says Pi Haaretz. Pi Haaretz really means the whole, but Frekter Ramban, the whole. I mean, holes happen all the time. I think the answer to your question is that the whole was created in addition with that, with a cover.
So the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that's pretty sure Sanhedrin. It talks about when he was walking the...
Good, we're going to get to the Gemara Sanhedrin right now. Very good, very good. So I'm glad I prepared. I'm on the right track over here. Very good, very good. So be'etzem, as we said now, that it's not just that the ground opened up and they fell in, it also got covered over. So PARSHAS, when it got covered over, so finished, it's covered over, you can't see. And Yitaka can't see. However, like you said, the Gemara in Babasra, Ayin Dal Ramad Aleph, it's also a Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara says there was a story. The Gemara brings many stories over there. And the Gemara says, with Rabbi Bar Chana, Rabbi Bar Chana was walking in the Midbar, and the Gemara says, Ahu Taya, an Arab Soicher, Yishmaeli, a Soicher, he saw Rabbi Bar Chana, and he told Rabbi Bar Chana, come, let me show you something very interesting. I want to show you the place. There's a crack in the ground. The Gemara says that they stuck in cotton. Al Kabbanim, he says, put your ear to the crack over here in the ground, and in here are the korach, the adas korach under the ground. He put his ear there, and the Gemara says that he heard the sounds of them saying Moshe Emes v'Seirasai Emes. And the Gemara says that every Rosh Chodesh you could hear it. Today is Rosh Chodesh, it's PARSHAS KORACH, so that's why I want to speak about this a little bit. Every Rosh Chodesh you're able to hear, if you know the place. We don't know where the place is, but if you know where the place is, you by that crack and you listen, you're able to hear how they're saying, Adas the Bnei Korach are saying Moshe Emes v'Seirasai Emes. Very interesting. The Alshach in this week's parasha says, when the pasuk says that they ran away, V'chol Yisrael asher sviva yisayim nasu l'kolam, they ran away. PARSHAS you would learn nasu l'kolam means, you know why they ran away? Because they heard l'kolam, to those that were being swallowed into the ground were yelling, they ran away. They also shouldn't be swallowed in. But says the Alshach nasu l'kolam, because already then they were saying Moshe Emes v'Seirasai Emes, and they heard that, that's why they ran away. Meaning to say is they saw that Korach v'Adasa, they were wrong. They themselves, what does it mean they were saying Moshe Emes v'Seirasai Emes? Else we'll see in a minute what exactly, how does that come in? But basically what they were saying is that we made a mistake. Why every Rosh Chodesh? Only Rosh Chodesh? I mean, obviously you could hear it every Erev Rosh Chodesh, but technically if it goes around like on a wheel, like the Gemara says, because the Eish of Gehenna is over there, so if it goes around like a piece of meat roasting and it turns, so technically they're saying it all the time, but why is it that you could hear it every Rosh Chodesh? Says the Marsha. And Korach challenged Moshe Rabbeinu by saying, Ki chola eida kulam kedoshim. And why is it that you, Aaron HaKohen, is the Kohen HaGadol? What exactly did Korach want? There should be a bunch of Kahanim Gedolim. How is that possible? There's a Kohen Gadol. There should be a few of them. Says the Marsha, Korach wanted these 12 Nesiim, every month another Nasi should be the Kohen Gadol. Should switch off. You do see the concept, these Mishmeres for the Kahanim. Korach wanted every month there should be a different Kohen Gadol. Says the Marsha, therefore, what'd say?
You want a new melech every month also?
It could be on the positions. You should have a rotation on the positions. So therefore, every Rosh Chodesh, which technically Korach's Taina was, hey, now it's Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. Now there should be the Nasi. The next Nasi should be able to be the Kohen Gadol, and for that, that's why every Rosh Chodesh Moshe Emes v'Seirasai Emes. There's another pshat on the Ein Yaakov that got at the Gemara. So the Pirush on the Ein Yaakov, he says, why on Rosh Chodesh? Because what happened Rosh Chodesh? What's Rosh Chodesh? Klal Yisrael brings a chatas. There was the Levana was the same size as the sun, and the Levana said it can't be the same because Ein Shnei Malachim Mishtamshim B'Keser Echad. Therefore, on Rosh Chodesh, it's the same idea. Ein Shtei Malachim Mishtamshim B'Keser Echad. Korach wanted there should be a lot of Kohanim Gedolim. It's not possible. You can't have more than one Kohen Gadol. What were they saying in the ground? What are they still saying? Moshe Emes v'Seirasai Emes. I mean, it's interesting. They could have been there saying Slach Lanu Chatasi Avisi B'Shati. Why Moshe Emes v'Seirasai Emes? Explains the Briskerov. We have the Yud Gimel Ikrim, the 13 Imams. We have Reb Shlomo Steinmetz made a Moiridige drive, Leil Nishmas, his son, that was Nifter Miran. Chazak people on the Yud Gimel Ikrim, the Yud Gimel Imams, people, we had hundreds of thousands of people to say it every single day. The Rishonim speak about that, different numbers. The Rambam in Pirush HaMashnayos in Sanhedrin, the Rambam lists 13 Ikrim. The Lashon HaRambam it's long because each one, we have 13 animams in short. He goes through each one and he brings them a kairos for it. Before saying the 13 Yesodis, the Rambam says, what a person has to remember, it's extremely important. The Ikrei Datenu, our Ikr Das, and Yesodis sells 13 Yesodis. And then he goes through, he brings the 13, the Yud Gimel Ikrim. Number 7 and number 8. Number 7 is Animam Emunah Shleiman Shenevuas Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Hashem Hoisa Amitis. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu, we believe Moshe Rabbeinu was a Navi Emes. It's one of the Yud Gimel Ikrim. But the Animam is we believe in the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. And then also number 8, Animam Emunah Shleiman Shekol HaTorah Metzuya Ata B'Yadeinu. All the Torah that we have, it was given by the Rabbeinu Shalom to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. Says the Briskerov, if you take a look in the Psukim, Korach v'Adasai were Kaifer in these two Ikrim of the Yud Gimel Ani Imams, these two Ikrim. The Pasuk says in the beginning, Rav Lachem ki chola eida kulam kedoshim umadu et asnaso ka'al Hashem. In other words, they were Kaifer on Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu said that Aaron should be the Kohen Gadol, and they said no. What? Who said what you're saying? In other words, they were Kaifer in the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, this is not the Chelik of Torah and Hashemayim. This is the Chelik that Moshe Rabbeinu was the Navi, and Moshe Rabbeinu said Aaron HaKohen should be the Kohen Gadol, and they challenged that, so they did not believe in Nevuah Moshe Rabbeinu. Weiter, they were also Kaifer in Torah Hashem. Rashi says that Korach said if you have a talis shekulat cheles, of course it doesn't need to have tzitzis. If the whole talis is white, you just have to put one string of tzitzis that's blue. If you have the whole baguette blue, then you have to have that the string should also be blue. So he was Kaifer b'Torahs that the Torah is min hashamayim. There's a Moira de Yerushalmi Takan Sanhedrin. Rav Amar Korach api Korasaya. But Oisa Shah Amar Korach. This is the Yerushalmi. Ein Torah min hashamayim v'loi Moshe Navi. In other words, Korach, as we'll see shortly, what was goyim to it, but Korach was Kaifer b'Nevuas Moshe was Kaifer b'Torah Hashem. That it's been a Torah min hashamayim. And for that, Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Bezoist heidem ki Hashem shlochani." By when he said to everyone that they should bring the sticks, Moshe Rabbeinu said, "You're going to see that I'm taka ki Hashem shlochani." In other words, I'm a navi emes. I'm a navi min hashamayim. V'oid ki loy melibi. The pasuk says Moshe Rabbeinu said ki loy melibi. In other words, I didn't make up the Torah. The Torah is min hashamayim. And therefore, that was when they went into the ground, they were saying Moshe Emes v'Seirasa Emes. Why was they saying Moshe Emes v'Seirasa Emes? Because what they were chayte was saying that Moshe is not Emes. Moshe Emes, Tahainu Moshe is Taka Navi min Hashem, is a Navi Emes. V'Seirasa Emes, Tahainu Torah min Hashemayim. If you take a look at the Rambam, this is Briskerov says, if you take a look in the Rambam, Pirsha Mishnayos, when he speaks the Yesod HaChes, the 8th Ani Imamim, which is B'Emunah Shleiman, that's Torah min hashamayim. So he brings the pasuk in our parsha, Vayomer Moshe bezois teidu ki Hashem shalachani lasas kol ha'mas ve'el ki loy melibi. In other words, he brings the pasuk that we just mentioned as a raya in the Yesod HaChes, that Torah is min hashamayim. On this, that Korach was chayte, Moshe Rabbeinu said, I'm going to bring a raya ki loy melibi, that Torah is ben hashamayim. Many others say the same Yesod Bariches or Gedalia Shor in a Sefer has pages long to be marchiv like this Yesod. in Noam Eliezer, the previous Scheiner Rebbe, the current grandfather, or yet even great-grandfather, also speaks about this Yesod, that this was Moshe Emes v'Seirasi Emes, the Gemara, that they say, and you can hear it, Rosh Chodesh. Today, Rosh Chodesh is as a kapara on the two things, the two Yesod Adas, that they were Chayta, that on the Nevuas Moshe Rabbeinu, and also Torah's Min HaShamayim. The Panim Yafis, the Afla, Sayin is Sefer Panim Yafis ala Torah, and also in the Hagdama to his Sefer Hafla, he says that the reason why they had to have this particular einish, and this will answer your question. What's your name? Sorry, Meir. We were learning before. Meir asked, why is it that you find that the Adas KORACH got such a einish that they got swallowed into the ground? I mean, these other chatoyim that happened, such a unique einish. Says the Panim Yafis, unbelievable. Kollel Yisrael, by Matan Torah, like it says, we're coming off Shavuos, Kaf Aleim Har Gegigis. And Kollel Yisrael, if Kollel Yisrael would not take the Torah, would be Sham Tehek Furaschem, they would be buried under the mountain. The Meila KORACH Vadasti that would take a koifer in the Torah, the Meila Sham Tehek Furaschem, the Taka had to be buried under the ground. That's why it had to happen like that. And he says also that the reason it happened, Sham Tehek Furaschem, if they don't take the Torah, was to take Torah Shebal Peh. And he says over here, KORACH, they didn't believe in Torah Shebal Peh. Any pirush of the Torah, anything that goes into what the Torah means, they didn't believe in. So that's why they had such a einish. How taka did they get to such a, let's call it, such a, I don't know if the right word is low, but such a unbelievable, not to believe in Nevuas Moshe, and not to believe in the Torah? V'oid, l'chayra, the Rabbeinu Shalom was maftiach in v'gam b'cha yaminu l'olam. Kollel Yisrael is going to believe in you, Moshe Rabbeinu. Says the Novominsker Rebbe that the pshat is that they had kina. They wanted also to be the kahanim gedolim. When a person has kina, even if a person knows what the emes is, he gets derailed. Absolutely, v'gam b'cha yaminu l'olam. They knew that Moshe Rabbeinu was the Navi. They knew that Torah was min hashamayim, but the kina derailed them. And he says that's why Taka, right when the Eidish came, and they Taka noticed that the kina destroyed them. Of course, Moshe Emes v'Seirasi Emes. They always knew Moshe Emes v'Seirasi Emes. But because of the kina, they went so far to not believe in Moshe, not to believe in the Torah, not to believe the pshat is that the kina kind of, like Avim Akalkelis as a Shiur, like they kind of lost track. Besides that there was no EMUNAH in Moshe, no EMUNAH in Torah Min HaShamayim, it was goyer moiridig machloikis. It was goyer machloikis. At kedei kach, the Torah says, after the whole story, the pasuk says, v'lo yiyeh chekoirach v'chadasai. What's v'lo yiyeh chekoirach v'chadasai? Not to, because they didn't believe in Moshe, they didn't believe in the Torah. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says, "Hamachzik b'machleikis oiver balav." It's a Gemara. They were chayte, as we spoke up until now, in 2 of the 13 animams. But they made a big uproar, a big machleikis, and the Torah says it's allowed to be machzik machleikis. Some of the Rishonim, which the PARSHAS HaGemara is that it's allowed to be machzik machlekes, the smak. Rabbeinu Yoinin Shari Tshuva brings it, lists that it's allowed. It's brought lahalacha. The Chafetz Chaim in the beginning of the Sefer lists out that if somebody speaks Lashon Hara, he's over in multiple lavan and asay. And then one of them he says that if a person speaks Lashon Hara, and they speaking Lashon Hara, it's goyrim machlokes, he's over in this lav. A lav. Anytime a person causes machlokes, gets involved in machlokes, fuels machlokes, he's over in a lav. So if we stop right here, first of all, we spoke up until now, when a person has kin, a person could be so derailed that they missed the two of the animams. Now we see weiter how machlokes, the Torah says machlokes came out of this, and memela, if a person's machzik machlokes, he's over balav. The Ramban actually understands that it's not if somebody's machzik b'machlokes, it's if somebody's ma'or on the kahuna. They were ma'or on the kahuna. They said that everybody else there should be other kahanim gedolim. If you're ma'or on the kahuna, you're over balav. The Gemara says the Ramban, that's a smachta ba'alma. It's not a lav min ha-Torah. When the Torah says lav, it's a lav not to be ma'or on kahuna, but to be machzik b'machloikus, what the Gemara says over b'lav, it's a smachta. The Rambam yet learns even a step further. The Rambam says that when the Torah says not to be like Korach, it's not a lav at all. The Rambam in Shroshim, in Midyan HaMitzvahs, before Yad HaChazaka, the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Rambam has Shroshim. What does he count for a mitzvah? What doesn't he count for a mitzvah? And the Rambam says in Shoirish Ches that not every time when the Torah says a lav, meaning to say is the word loy, v'lo doesn't mean a lav. Sometimes it's shlilus, which means the Torah is saying, you see what just happened now, this is going to help and is going to cause that it shouldn't happen again. It shouldn't happen. But not that it's a lav. The same like the Ramban that the Gemara in Sanhedrin is asmachta. But what yes is going to happen, like the Pasuk says, weiter, Kasha Dibra Hashem biyad Moshe, like Rashi brings, that what's going to happen, the Gemara says, the Gemara also in Sanhedrin, Amachzik Machlekes gets tzaras. Now, Pi Hashem biyad Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu, Chazal say, because spoken cloudly, so when he put his hand in his pocket and he took it out, that tzaras, oinish for called Machsa Machlekes, speak Lashon Hara, but Al Kaponim, there's no lav. Some Rishonim say there's a lav to Machsa Machlekes. The Ramban learns the lav is speaking about something else. It's speaking about being Mo'or on Kahuna. The Ram says it's not a lav at all. Whether if it's a lav or it's not a lav, and like what the Rambam learns that it's shlilas, that this should help and enable that it shouldn't happen, Machlokes is terrible. I just want to quote a line or two from the Rambam. The Rambam wrote a letter to his son. The Rambam wrote a letter to his son, Rabbeinu Avram, and it's called the Geras HaMusar, that he writes to his son. And in the middle he says, Al teshakzu es nafshei seichem b'machlokes. Don't disgust yourself with machlokes. He says, machlokes hamachala es aguf. It destroys a person physically. It deteriorates his body. Hanefesh, his neshama, his soul. The hamomain, and a person loses his money because of machlokes. And if a person loses his body, his nefesh, his neshama, his soul, and his money, uman nishar oid, what else is left? So he's telling his son, stay away from machlokes at any cost, it's not worth it. Says the Rambam, I see families fell apart. People lost their positions. V'sorim husru megedulasam. A person, when he gets involved in machlokes, he can be a sar, a very powerful person. But once he's involved in machlokes, he's doing it because of machlokes, and he could do such a wrong thing that he'll lose his position. Cities got destroyed, on and on, how terrible it is. And he says that the philosophers tried to explain how bad machlokes is, and they didn't even get to the end how far it is, just even beginning how terrible it is. So from machlokes, whether if it's a lav or it's not a lav, it's like what the Rambam says, shlilus, it's terrible. Just to conclude, a yisoid, mamash, a very important yisoid. KORACH wanted the madrig of a kohen gadol. Of course, because of that, he came not to believe in the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, in Torah min hashamayim. It caused terrible machlokes. But let's go back to the beginning. KORACH wanted ki chola eda kulam kedosha. He wanted to have. He was a Levi. He wanted to have kahuna. Says the galant Rav. He was killed al kiddush Hashem. His yahrzeit was this past Sunday, and he says the following. This is a yesod in avodas Hashem. A person has to understand and know that the Eibishter wants his avodah exactly in the position he is. A person shouldn't think that if I would have a different job, I would be in a different kollel, I would be in a different yeshiva, I would live in a different neighborhood, in a different town, then it would be perfect. Then I would be able to do exactly, I'll be able to daven properly and learn properly. Of course, if a person is in one shul and he feels he could daven better in a different shul, it's done b'chachma, he does it with das Torah, he could steig better. These people that move to a different town when they have to, that's not what he's saying. But if a person has to be where he has to be, this is his position, this is what he's doing, but his mind is telling him, if only I would be somewhere else, I'll be able to daven better, I'll be able to learn better, I'll be able to steig better. That's a mistake. That's a mistake. The Baal HaTurim says over here, Messiah, the Baal HaTurim says there are three, ubikashtem gam kahuna. The taina was on KORACH, ubikashtem, you wanted kahuna. So the Baal HaTurim brings, there are three psukim in Tanakh that say ubikashtem. Over here, ubikashtem misham es Hashem Elokecha, and then also in Yirmiyah, ubikashtem oisi. Says the galant Rav, ubikashtem oisi. You want to know how to find me? Bekashtem oisi is talking about the Eibishter. Just the Baal HaTurim connects the three of them. Misham, from exactly where you are. If a person is a Levi, he shouldn't think, if I would be able to be, imagine I would be able to be the Kohen Gadol, I would be able to go lefnai, lefnim, that's like the spitz level. No, the Eibishter wants that we should work from where we are. And this same Yesoid you find also in the Bais Aaron. The Stolner Rebbe brings Reb Shlomo Karliner, whose yahrzeit is Bais Aaron's yahrzeit was just now middle of Sivan. He brings Reb Shlomo Karliner. He says in Kriya Shema we say V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha. So Rashi brings Shlo yeh libach choylek al hamokim. So he says, what does it mean, choylek al hamokim? You shouldn't be choylek on the place you are. If this is where you are, whether if it's the physical place or it's the place in a yeshiva, in a job, whatever matzav a person is, shali libach, your heart shouldn't be choylek al hamokim on the place. Pasha the pshat is not to be choylek al hamokim. And the Eibush, he says, al hamokim, meaning to say is if the Eibush to put in a certain place, in a certain position, that's the Ratzon Hashem. And we should be zeichet, all of us, wherever we are in our position, to be able to grow weiter and weiter. A good chodesh and a wonderful Shabbos.
Yeah.